Planning Commission to order. First order of business is to recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
John, are you going to take the roll call this evening?
I am. Agostinelli?
Here.
Klein?
Here.
McManus?
Here.
DeGood?
Here.
Fudge?
Here.
Robertson?
Here.
Racine?
Here. First order of business is public comment, and for those in the audience, we actually have two periods of public comment, once at the beginning of the meeting right now and once after we've completed our agenda items. So if anyone has any information they would like to ask us or tell us, please come to the microphone and tell us what it is you'd like to tell us. State your name and address. And if there's no need to come to the podium to talk, then we'll close public comment. All right, we'll close public comment, move along. The next item is a review and approval of the agenda. If anyone has any conflicts of interest, we should hear about that. And if not, we need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make the motion we approve the agenda.
Support.
Any discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Next is a review of the minutes from our September 14th meeting. Are there any suggested changes to those?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Support.
Any discussion on that? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Next item is correspondence. John, I don't think I saw anything in the packet. Has anything come in?
There is no correspondence.
Okay. Then moving along to reports. Molly, any town board report you'd like to give this evening?
Well, we had no town board meeting last night, and I was going to report on the short-term rental, but it sounds like this board knows about it. But for the public who might be listening in, the short-term rental issue has passed out of committee and probably will be headed to the Senate in the next few days. So voice your opinion.
Thanks, Molly. Planning commissioners, Bob, any zoning board of appeals?
We had no meeting, thank you.
Okay. Chris, how about anything for the Parks and Rec?
We have an upcoming meeting on Monday to review a draft plan for the Commons area, and then once that's ready, there'll be another public input session, and that should be closing out in the next month or so.
Great, thanks. Joe, you know anything about the Joint Planning Commission that I haven't heard of yet?
No, again, we haven't had a meeting, but we do have one coming in October, so a couple more weeks.
Great. All right, thanks. John, any staff report?
I do not.
All right, then we'll keep moving along under unfinished business. First up is item 6A, Planning Department Report 2022-91. Master Plan Update, talk about the survey results. John.
Yeah, so in your packet is a very raw draft report regarding the community survey, which we conducted in August. The document itself is just intended to get the information, some summary information to you. We will put this in a better format and something that will be a little bit more attractive in terms of its design when it's presented to the Township Board. But we wanted, at this point, to give you an opportunity to review the findings from the survey and to give us any feedback on that. If there's any additional information we should include or formatting or anything like that, this is a good opportunity to kind of give us a feedback on that. So as you recall, this was a survey that we're doing for the benefit of developing an update to the Township Master Plan. So it's a good opportunity to ask some questions of the community. The last survey was done in 2015, so this is an update. Some of the questions were repeats of that previous survey done in 2015. This one, we did similar to the previous survey, we did a random sample. So our target was to have at least 15% return rate We did a random sample so that it's statistically accurate, so it's representing kind of generally the voices of the residents in Garfield. With almost about 20,000 people, we decided to do a sample of 4,200 residents, which we broke out by precinct. And since there are now 7 precincts within the township, we basically did 600 from each of those precincts. Sending them out, people were able to respond either through a mail-back survey, or they did have an option to do it online. Basically, most of the people responded with hard copy. We had about 130, maybe 150 that did online. Of the total responses, we got 875. So our return rate was almost 21%, so we were very pleased with that. So the results, I'll kind of go through these. I did, in the report, we'll probably put some key findings there. And instead of going through those right at the moment, let's just kind of maybe dive into it. But the bullet points at the bottom of page 2 are intended to just be a quick summary for people to kind of see before, if they want to dive into the information, they can kind of just look at that instead. Starting on page 3, we look at the survey participants. So we have the voter map, the precinct map, so you can get an idea where the response rates were from. And in case of looking at them by the graph at the bottom there, you'll notice that most of the respondents were living in precinct 2 and kind of the Silver Lake Road area there between Zimmerman and 31. And then after that would be precinct 5, so up in the northwest corner of the township. And then followed by 1, which would be kind of the southwest near or in around Silver Lake. The next question at the top of page 4, and I'll go through these. If you don't want to interrupt me, you're welcome to, as we kind of go through this. But when we posed this question, I think we would have, this was a question we repeated from the 2015 survey, and in hindsight, I think I would have structured it differently, because it's kind of hard for us to pull data out of this. But basically, the question was asking how old are you, and then how old are the occupants within your household. So I'm trying to calculate what's the information gathered from this. Basically, the majority of respondents were older than 65. That probably should have been broken down a little bit more. Also, it's really kind of hard to figure out what was kind of a median age of people. I think we should have had initially the age of the respondent, and then a separate question was to identify their households. From that, though, of the responses, we did, these household members that are responding are representing about 1,782 people. So the average household size was about 2.05, which is close to what it is in the census.
John, I just had a format comment on this one, and I think that's the only one I had a format comment on. I had a hard time at first understanding exactly what was being represented there. Looking back at the survey helped greatly, but the bolded black about age of respondents and all of the members of the household, that basically describes the left-hand column that's in gray about the ages of respondents, but there probably ought to be something like number of persons.
Sure.
Off to the left, maybe with an arrow or something that shows that the 1, 2, 3, and 4, that's what that's supposed to represent. Because at first, just looking at this, it was not really clear. I had to work at it pretty hard to get that one understood.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll probably eliminate the weighted average column out of there and move that over, because that's the total in terms of representative people within those households. So yeah, like I said, unfortunately, I think I probably would have did this a little bit differently, because to try to interpret this is not easy. It doesn't really give us a clear indicating of what's the what's the age of the person that responded versus the members in the household. Length of residence, it was kind of interesting.
John?
Yep.
I'm also curious if you might be able to extract some data out of that that just clearly states how many of the respondents were represented families of, three or, families with children. I guess that's what I'm curious about.
Okay.
Versus, I was struck in the statistics by the total number of apparent respondents that it seems to indicate that a lot of the response was from people 65 years and older. But it's unclear whether people were living in the house or if it was themselves,
Right.
right?
Yeah, and I think we're gonna have a hard time with this, pulling that out, because it probably should have been separated. That's what I'm saying.
But you can tell if the number of households where the one respondent or two respondents were 65 years or older, right?
Yes, sort of.
Okay.
Not real clear. Not real clear on
Yeah.
that.
Okay, thanks.
Because when they respond to the first one, they're gonna be at least a registered voter, so they're gonna be at least that 18 up and above.
Mhm.
But if there was children in the household, they would also be in that first column as well. So that it really didn't lend itself. It should have, like I said, probably been broke out twice. Length of residence is interesting because we do have a lot of long-term residents, but also a significant number of short-term residents, which was kind of good to see, because knowing that the responses would kind of give, I think, a pretty good mix. So I think it's going to have a good variety. In terms of likely to move within the next year, most people obviously are not. There's a percentage that are at least considering or are likely to. What is the reason why they are moving? The highest one that came out was into a newer or larger home. And then we did have kind of an open-ended question there for other reasons, and that was looking at, we kind of going through those responses. Those were basically, those would have been written responses, so we kind of went through and identified what were the top three responses, seeking more affordable housing situation or downsizing, which would have kind of rolled back into the second bar there where it says into a smaller home or downsizing, and then work-related move, which would have been the one bar there where it was 18.45%. Wait, excuse me. For work-related move.
It almost seems like two of those are redundant, because there's,
Right.
downsizing is one of the responses, and then the reason to specify is downsizing. So whether they just missed it or not, same with work-related and, or, moving to be closer to a job. Those could be due to two different things, but, it seems like there was some repeat answers there, so.
Yeah, and I think in terms of when you provide a space like that, people are probably thinking that they should also respond in that way. So it's not really, clear. So even though they may have already checked the box and then entered into the text as well. So it's better almost to have it there listed and then, break it apart. But this is some of the nuances to actually structuring the survey itself. Moving on to page 6, why do you choose where you live today? And the top answers there were availability, affordability, and safe neighborhood. So it was interesting to know how safety really did reign high in both this response and the second, the response after this. But certainly people like the comfort of the community, availability, and affordability. So what's out there in terms of housing stock and housing choices, and being, price point at something that people can afford and are comfortable in being in.
course, we should probably bear in mind with respect to affordability that the vast majority of people that, maybe I shouldn't say that, but a lot of people that return the survey have lived here for over 20 years, so
Sure.
it might have been affordable when they bought, but that doesn't necessarily speak to the present.
Right, that's true. We did also kind of go peruse the other reasons in terms of trying to kind of quantify those, or what were the ones that were the top reasons in there. Proximity to services was there, location to the city and so forth, closer to amenities, lakefront areas, and then family reasons why they may have inherited a home there and are still living in that location. Moving on to quality of life, these were, they had to identify what of the, at least those that we listed there, what were the reasons why, and again, feeling of safety and security, relationship to nature is up there as well. So things, parks, which was a popular theme throughout the survey responses, is definitely indicated there. And then access to public services, as well as affordability or generally cost of living. So that's beyond just housing costs, but also in terms of day-to-day living costs as well. For future goals, the focus protecting the environment is high, along with housing choices and affordability. That was another one, in addition to parks, is housing choices and affordability was something that also was in there, kind of in the responses that we read from people throughout the survey. So those are kind of the top issues that they wanted to. There's an interesting kind of sidebar to this, particularly when we talk about relationship to nature and access to parks and so forth. In 2008, there was a study that was done for this region, including Grand Traverse County, that was a survey of people, and one of the things that it was a values survey, so it was really getting at the core of why people responded. So you could answer a question, well, relationship to nature. So why is that so important in terms of quality of life? And it was done by Harris Interactive as part of the Grand Vision Project. And Harris Interactive is a national polling firm, and they typically work for like car companies and those types of entities. And they really try to get down into deep why people respond the way they do and kind of get into their values. And basically, that relationship to nature equates to one of the main reasons people like to live in this region, is that having access to nature and having it close by ultimately leads to a certain peace of mind, and people feel much more, a greater sense of happiness in terms of living here. So that's why it's important to have that and to protect that. So that's why it's also kind of gets back behind, why is that important? Well, people feel better when they live close to nature. That's why they like their parks, they like their trails and so forth. So I thought it kind of confirms what we're, the responses that we're getting. Moving on to housing, on page 8 there, we have the type of housing that the township should have more of, and the top ones in there were single-family subdivisions, along with senior living or independent living, and then followed by townhouses and condominiums or attached housing was up there as well. And then certainly single-family rural lots, and then apartments kind of followed after that group as well. And then we had asked this question, and these were kind of how they were structured back from the 2015 survey. As a follow-up one is, type of housing should be encouraged in the area I live. And it kind of is a similar pattern there in terms of the responses. So there's a slight difference, and where single-family rural lots is a little bit higher than townhomes, condos, and senior living. So my guess is probably the response in that second question if people are living in those situations, are probably more adept to saying, that's what I would like to see in the area where I live. But similar to the question prior to that, but just a slight adjustment there. The next one is a kind of a open question, but it was kind of an interesting observation that we saw. So it's kind of a land use development related one, and it basically just says Garfield is developing either too quickly, about right, too slowly, or no opinion. And it said about right at almost 40%, but right behind that at a little over 32% was too quickly. And when we looked back at the 2015 results, about right was higher at almost 52%, and too quickly was much lower at around 25%. So that has changed, which kind of makes me think that people are getting a little bit more stressed about the pattern of growth in the township. So for the most part, probably still okay, but just reading through the comments at the open-ended section, I think they're a little concerned about, some of the growth that we are having, that they are seeing.
It would be interesting to find out which precincts felt that way. If all 7 of the precincts felt that way, or if, the rural east side is more feeling that way, or is it just the people up on Lafreniere, that precinct, or,
Yeah, we can do that for any of these questions. We do have that ability through the, all the data here, even though it came back hard copy, was all entered into SurveyMonkey. That's what allows us to put these charts together really quickly. So we can actually break down any of these by precinct. So if this one we can definitely do, and if there are others that you are interested, we can do that as well. But yeah, that would be a very good one, just to kind of see what their perception is. It's kind of an open-ended question because it's very subjective, but it is kind of one to kind of feel what the pulse of the people are feeling. This kind of page 10 is a variety of questions, and probably in the formatting we'll spread this out over several as opposed to one table here. So it's a little bit, just realizing the font size is pretty small. But we can definitely format that in a better font. But this was a variety of topics that I think are pretty interesting. And so I kind of highlighted the more bolder colors, whether it was green or positive or orange, maybe disagreeing with it, are highlighted in the stronger color, and then whatever the secondary amount was in terms of percentages, more of that lighter faded color. So kind of give you a sense of where people more heavily leaning, or are they more split on something. So talking about incentivizing redevelopment of outdated commercial and industrial areas, it's pretty clear that the township residents are supportive of that. So when we think of something like Cherryland Center and maybe doing a brownfield redevelopment plan for that, it seems like they would be supportive of that. In terms of keeping the outer edges of Garfield as mostly residential or agricultural in character, that as well was a very strong response. Large new housing development should include a variety of housing types. This was still positive, although there was some kind of, to some degree, disagree, but for the most part, people were still supportive of that. Following up, efforts should be made to retain agricultural land in Garfield, and that is definitely pretty strong at almost well over 80-90% in that response. In terms of, I want more paved bicycle paths and sidewalks in the area where I live. People were supportive of that, almost about 2/3, about 62-63%. As well as funding that was still supportive of that. Maybe a little bit a difference on that in terms of the disagree or strongly disagree, but generally still in favor of that. Improving commercial corridors such as South Airport in terms of limiting signs, building sidewalks, and reducing driveways, adding trees, those types of things. So when it comes to site plan review and looking at those things those amenities, when we look at a site for either landscape buffers or sidewalks, and how we do signage and so forth, people are looking for that. So that helps the planning commission understand when we're going through those individual site plans that work that you're doing is important. Directing dense multifamily residential places closer to the city where there's services and typically a greater density of utilities seems to be is supported there in terms of 48% or 49% agreeing and 16% strongly agreeing. A little bit more split was, I wish there was a park closer to my home. It's interesting how, since there was support for parks in terms of located close to their home, which makes us believe that people still value parks, but they don't necessarily, they feel like they don't need one right by their house, that there's either one's already available to them or it's in close proximity.
That would also be a good one, to Molly's point, to find out which precincts feel that way. 'Cause
And that could be
I doubt
tied
that
with-
anybody in precinct 1 is gonna feel that way they shouldn't, with the biggest park sitting right down the road, so.
Yeah.
And that would be interesting to have that same breakdown, because I was struck by how there was almost 50% of the people disagreed that they wish there was a park closer to their home. And yet, almost 50%, almost nearly the same 50% said that we should purchase more parkland. So where were the people that were saying those things, and were they, because that doesn't seem consistent.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's just, it's about, to me, that speaks to access and what they have available, but yeah.
I think you're right. I don't think if somebody, I wish there was a park closer to home, if you don't check that box, that doesn't mean you don't want a park. It may mean there's already a park next door to me. I don't need another one.
Right. And then the one right after that, Garfield should purchase more parkland, to me indicates that kind of gets back to that development issue. I think it's important, and we were kind of surprised by that a little bit, but it seems also that people are trying to, that's one of the ways in terms of managing some of the development and of the community, is to also thinking about the future and ensuring that there's parks there in place.
It also might be an opportunity to educate the public on how many parks we actually have. There's
Right.
a lot of parks out there that people may not know that are there.
Well, and we have a lot of parks that aren't owned by the township that are in our community, such
Well,
as
too.
the soccer fields over there at Keystone, the
Soccer
Boardman
fields,
Valley,
With all the Boardman River trails and.
yeah,
and,
Hickory Hills, Hickory Meadows.
I mean, there's,
There's we have a lot of parkland, and so. In terms of permitting winery tasting rooms, the majority was in agreement of that, but also there was a lot that were disagreeing that. So that's one that's, I would probably caution going forward on that, at least at this time, and maybe want to do some additional investigation in that. But it kind of seems like it's tipping, even though that in terms of the quadrants, agreeing was the highest number. When we look at the totals, it's tipping more towards probably disagreeing. So it's kind of a split vote on that one. Permitting marijuana dispensaries, that one was very clear. Over 66% said no. Short-term rentals, I thought, was pretty strong as well. When you get over 2/3 people saying no on something, that's a pretty strong number. I thought this was interesting, accessory dwelling units. I thought that was a pretty strong number. When you put those two together, you're also talking upwards of 60% of the people. So it's something that we should definitely investigate as a potential housing. Tall buildings, definitely a no. That was also very clear. And then we asked that question about changing the name, just to throw it out there, and That was probably the strongest resounding no.
Good.
Darn it, I was hoping for something crazy.
So we can kind of put that one to rest. So we'll pull out if there's at least the one on the parkland, maybe not only the location of park closer to my home, but also purchasing parkland. We can probably break out a couple of those by precinct. If there's any others, let us know.
And the housing,
Yes, and the housing.
on housing, would be interesting to know,
Yeah,
you know, if you've got Lafreniere Road, whatever precinct we have there, where we have lots of it, how they feel about it, you know,
Right.
versus somebody who's out in 6.
yeah, I think using the voter precincts was really helpful because it does give us a breakdown of, based on where people live. The comment section on 11, there was a lot of comments. So basically, that was just an open-ended part of the survey. I read through all of those and basically as people would bring up different issues, I put a little tick mark and then counted them and trying to get some basic themes. And so those that I had at least 5 or more comments, I kind of condensed down into these particular topic areas. Traffic and poor road conditions, whether it's the pavement service or just a lot of cars and trucks and so forth on the roads, was by far something that was a big question, and we know that's a lot on people's minds a lot. Even though we don't, where we work with the road commission, it's really under their jurisdiction. It's something that we can share with them just to let them know that it's still on the minds of people, which they probably already know. And again, these aren't necessarily as scientific, so these are just for ones that people decided to write down. Pathways and sidewalks was important, but also one theme I was reading in there is the condition of them, whether it's, that there's weeds growing in them, or there's cracks or roots, or as well as are they plowed in the winter time. So they're also concerned as the maintenance of those pathways and sidewalks. Housing was definitely up there as well, as we saw supportive of that in the survey itself. Parks and park amenities, so different activities like pickleball and so forth were identified in there. No short-term rentals. And then there's this kind of, I called it too much or unattractive development. I think it was kind of a really subjective thing, but I think it's just where people feel overwhelmed and they feel like there's too much of it, and that it's, in some cases, they didn't feel was very attractive of newer development. So that was kind of overwhelming them. Interesting, though, we did have comments there that were supportive of short-term rentals. So it wasn't, and just as we saw that it wasn't unanimous in the survey, there was some people that actually identified that they would like to see short-term rentals permitted in the township. Protecting more of our rural areas or the natural environment, Silver Lake and so forth, those were definitely identified. Senior living facilities, senior living options. And then there was some support for changing the township name, but only if it had some, name that was reflective of the area or made sense. So if it was Traverse Township, which the township was originally called, or something of that nature would be okay. And then comments related to Hartman Hammond, we had kind of right down the middle. Some comments were against it and some of it were for it. And then it was nice to see there was actually some compliments about the survey, and people saying thank you for allowing the opportunity, and actually complimenting township leadership in their operations, parks department and so forth. So it was nice to see some of those comments is made as well. So that's kind of the report. We'll also just include this copy of the report, or excuse me, the survey questionnaire that will go with it. And we'll adjust that breakdown and provide that in a revised report document.
Sometimes things that get presented to us, we tend to forget after a while, so when it comes time to working on the master plan, maybe more next year, it might be helpful for us that might have forgotten some of this stuff to be reminded of the survey results on some of these topics when we are focusing on those topics specifically during our master plan work.
Yeah, I think this is something we'll be able to mine a lot out of for quite some time here. Like I said, even, when we talk about, doing site plan review and you're requiring those things like landscaping and, if you're getting pushback, you can say, well, our residents are expecting this. It's
Yeah,
not just, the 7 members of the planning commission, it's the community is. So the beauty of this one is that it is statistically valid and does have good representation of the community, so it's something that we can hang our hat on. We will probably do some open surveying as well, where we just allow something on, through our newsletter and on the website. It's good to hear and give people comments. And that we might probably use as an opportunity to maybe present some ideas to people. And so maybe as we're getting farther in the process for master plan discussions, if we want to pose some ideas out to people and just say, what are your thoughts about this or something like that? So there's still opportunity to do other surveying. It's just nice to be able to fall back on this effort that was done, so.
Just a comment, and when you do that for the general public, it's a real opportunity to educate them, and that would be a time to, what do you think about parks? Garfield Township has this park, this park, this park, this park, within its boundaries. And so do you think we have enough parks? This is how many multifamily units we have in the township. And so what do you think about that? Do you think that's enough or, not enough? But you can educate with some of those, statistics of what we have and help people understand what's here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think in hindsight, I think one of the things when we were structuring the survey questionnaire, we were concerned about brevity and making sure.
Sure.
I was looking at the average response times for people doing it online, and it was about 6 to 7 minutes that they were spending. So wasn't too bad. But I think in hindsight, maybe having kind of prefaced some of those questions with some context may have been a little bit helpful. We're not trying, you be careful because you don't want to lead people, but it helps them to maybe understand why the question is being asked a little bit more. But yeah, I think we can certainly do on some of those.
In the newsletter, they've got time to sit down and.
Right.
Not rushing through.
When do you think you'll be getting back with us with your updates about some of these topics per precinct basis?
Well, we can do that. We'll do that as part of this
Okay.
really quick. It's not hard for us to do that at
Okay.
all. I mean, we could have that at your next meeting.
Good, cool.
I'd like to kind of get this, what I'd like to do is maybe submit this at your next meeting, but also get it to the township board, because it's kind of fresh, and I know that they're going through stuff. So we'll probably, as we kind of clean this up and make it look better, we'll have it on the next township board agenda. So we'll also have that, we can send that out. Actually, we could probably email that out to you in advance of the meeting as well,
Sure.
so.
Anybody else with any comments or questions for
Just a
John?
question, how did we determine who got the surveys?
How do you determine? It's a random sample, so basically we used the qualified voter file, so you had to be a registered voter to determine residency in the township. And basically, from that file, it's broken down into 7 precincts. So in each precinct, we picked out 600 people. We then took, knowing that you could also have the same person you could have 2 or more people in one household. If there were duplicates, we pulled them out and did another.
How did you decide which 600 to pick? That's what I'm trying to find out.
It's random.
Oh, through Excel? I mean, how do we do the random? Yeah, they have through Excel spreadsheet, there's a random sample calculator through that, so it just picks them up.
Randomizer.
Randomizer.
It'll randomly select you 600.
But yeah, we had the full list of all voters within those precincts so we were provided by the clerk's office. So we just ran that through and it just
Okay.
picked them out.
That's what I want to know.
And then we went through, if their addresses matched, then we threw them out. And so we picked, so we didn't have any duplicates. So we didn't want two people from the same household. So we were also trying to be representative of the households.
Do we know what percentage of our 20,000 or so population are registered voters that's the pot from which you started
I was
drawing?
gonna ask that same thing.
It's pretty high.
I would say it's got to be pretty high. I don't
I
know.
think the population's around 14,000 or 20,000, and I think there's 14,000 registered voters.
Okay, I didn't know
Yeah.
what that sounded
Pretty
like.
sure. I hear the number a lot.
Decent.
How many registered voters there are, and there's a lot.
Especially now, I can find out from the clerk's office, and then I can put that in the report too, just for reference.
Okay, you're gonna describe how you came up with the names and how you put the survey together in your report, whatever.
Yeah, we can put some more detail into that, yeah. Yep.
I like that phrase that Joe used, randomizer, but that makes it pretty obvious you weren't just hand-picking or cherry-picking names, so
Yeah.
it was somehow computer-generated, it sounds like, and that's probably worth putting in the report so everybody understands that that's what was done.
It's a software that's used for, that's how if there's 10,000 entries and they pick 2 winners or 3 winners or 5 winners, that's how they do it.
Yeah.
They don't put them in a tub and draw a name out anymore. It's all done electronically. So,
Yeah, no, that gives us some certainty so that it is statistically valid, so that we know that it's not something that is slanted or anything. That's why we want to do this, as opposed to kind of those open-ended questions that you post a question on, excuse me, on a website or something like that. You're going to get, it's not going to be accurate. There's only going to be those that want to respond. So.
Any other comments or suggestions?
Got somebody out here.
Well, I'm sorry?
Will you receive the public?
Yeah, there's such an overwhelming amount, we got so much to do tonight. Sure, come on up if you want to talk.
Not normally, but.
My name is Scott Rokas. Thanks for seeing me. I live at 1673 Cass. I have I have to make an embarrassing admission. I was picked by the randomizer, but I think it ended up in the recycle bin.
Uh-oh.
So not knowing how your process works, I typed up a letter thinking I'd have to get it in before you close the gate. So I brought the letter, but after listening to you, I realized this is a long, ongoing process. So I didn't know if I could enter the letter into as a comment toward the master plan.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to read it, but I forgot my readers.
And we'll provide that as correspondence to the planning commission.
Thank you.
So I'll actually put it in their packets.
And it actually speaks to a lot of the points that you brought up and you spoke about. And one of the things that I would like to touch on is your question about parks. You said you have a lot of parks in the area. Well, parks can come in a lot of different flavors and versions, and there's different kinds of parks. And I think in Garfield Township, there's zero or not many parks for small children. You know, I live right across the street from the Conservancy on Cass. We go across there a couple of times a week. They've just put some things in for small children for their learning center, and it's like, for us, it's like being a thirsty man in a desert giving a glass of water. You know, there's just nothing in the township for small children. Hickory Hills, it's not for small kids. So what we ended up doing is going out to the park in Blair Township.
Have you been to the one on Silver Lake Road?
I have. It's okay, but to be honest, there's parks in local schools. They're playgrounds that we use that are better than that one. So we just wait for the school to close down and we sneak into the schools and we use that for our children. So we discovered this past summer that the Township Park in Blair is the nicest park in the whole county. It's wonderful. So they have I detailed that in the letter as well and some other concerns. I hope you take the time to read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your efforts and looking forward for the township. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
John,
Well,
would,
you'll have to change this response now. We now have 876 responses.
Yes.
John, would you make sure and distribute that letter to the Parks Commission as well?
Sure, we can do that. I can
And
have
input.
that on your desk on Monday.
Thank you.
And I was just going to mention, but, one of the things that the township is doing is we have a new park, River East Park, off of Keystone near Hammond. And the mindset on that right now is we're doing some improvements, some basic things, parking lot, putting actually in a dog park this fall. But it's kind of an open slate at this point. And we didn't really want to do many more improvements. There's a pavilion there so you can have a picnic and everything like that. But we want to kind of get people to start using the property and getting accustomed to that this is one of their parks, and then kind of get feedback before we go in there and say, oh yeah, we want to do this, a ball field or whatever. Trying to get an idea let's get people onto the property, getting them using it, and then kind of see where some of these things, what the demand is. And, some of those we knew there was a big demand for dog park because that's probably the number one park amenity that we have, and knowing that this one in Silver Lake is very popular. So we wanted to do that. But beyond that, we're kind of waiting, kind of seeing what people are interested in.
Yeah. I got the answer to your question. 17,088 registered voters on a population of 20,000.
Oh, that seems unreal.
That was seven.
Better than most of the country.
It's not Chicago, it'd be the other way. If it was Chicago, we'd have 20,000 registered voters and 17 population, but it's not quite there yet.
And they're all alive.
What was that number? 17,000?
17,088 registered voters in the
Okay.
township. That comes from a good source, by the way. I'm just saying.
Oh, good.
Nice to have connections.
So,
All right, well, thanks, John, and we'll look forward to utilizing that information and tweaking it. Next on the agenda is item 6B, Planning Department Report 2022-92, an update on the Meyer driveway study results. Looks like they're kind of ahead of schedule, aren't they?
Yeah, so as you recall, you approved this, the minor amendment to the PUD where Meyer is located back in June. And one of the conditions of the approval was to look at the intersection there of their north entryway, their driveway, where it's signaled over there by the Burger King. And we called that to your attention because in the 1997 approval, there was a requirement that there be a double left turn out of there. And so before enforcing that condition, there was thought to have a further analysis done of that particular intersection, and that that a response be presented back to the township. So there's, actually, I should point out in my memorandum or a report there that there is a typo there that's further down, and it references the traffic study condition within the report and decision order, which is attached to the report, but it's condition 3.C. So it was supposed to be highlighted, but it's basically on page 4 of 7 in that report and decision order. It actually has it as section 3, paragraph C.
That'd need to get changed in the draft motion then, too.
Correct,
Yeah.
right. So Fishbeck completed a traffic study this summer on behalf of Meyer, and then presented a report. We then had OHM acting on behalf of the township, conducted a review of that traffic study, and then provided a response that they felt that it was acceptable based on the methodology and the recommendations. The recommendations that came out of the conclusions and the recommendations were suggesting that there not be any roadway nor traffic control improvements for this. And they did work in concert with MDOT in terms of some of the improvements that were there as well. So just wanted to bring this back to you and just acknowledge that they addressed that condition that was as part of that approval.
Looks to me like they did what we asked them to do, and they are a little ahead of the timeline that we were thinking. But that's refreshing that somebody did what we asked them to do.
Well, I thought it was interesting, too, that there was some negativity to the double left as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that was interesting to note that while we think of that as getting cars out onto the street quicker, it does also create some problems as well.
Anybody have any questions about this report or issues?
I think the overall, when you look at this development, obviously, it's been there a long time, but it does have a lot of different accesses. You know, it does have, the light has 2 other accesses out front. You can get out the stoplight going down Frankie Road, you know, so there are some other alternatives. Much as I think that intersection needs to be improved, it may not need to be improved, but it was interesting study.
Yeah, there's actually, I think, there's 3 driveway entrances on US 31 and 3 on Frankie.
Right.
2 of them within the city, but they're
But
to
the
the
Frankie
north.
one would get you to another stoplight too, so that in
Yeah.
a roundabout way. A lot of people use that way as well, so.
And hopefully, too, with the improvements that they're making out there, will be a lot better with the, basically, it's all going to be new asphalt pavement out there, so smoother surface and so forth.
It's a mess right now.
Yeah.
Oh, is there a, since Molly mentioned that, I was going to as well, is during that construction, is there a certain amount of the parking lot they need to maintain available? Because there's been,
And where they have parking is cut off, so the cars come down and there's no place for them to turn
That's a
around
dead
and go
end, that's
back
right.
out.
It's,
So they're backing in and backing out. And
well, and they mentioned, and I
That
think
was me yesterday.
when they came to us, they mentioned that they would have that parking lot to the north as parking for, during the construction. That is completely cut off, and that's all construction equipment, storage things, so that parking lot to the north, none of it's available for overflow parking. So it's like, wow, it is a mess, right?
But they're moving pretty.
Yeah, they are, and they're paving now, so I think the parking lot will be done fairly
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah,
so.
they're moving pretty
Probably,
fast.
you know, because they've been working, I think they've been working through the night, when they had good weather, they've been working through the night there, so.
We can take a look at that, too. So, I mean, if there are problems out there where it's,
Well, there's
I haven't heard
nothing.
any complaints, but I just, you know,
It's just lots of,
I walked in there one morning, it was just
Bad
fence all the way down
faces.
that parking lot. I go, where am I supposed to park?
gotta take it slow, so.
well, I imagine they're trying to get the paving done before
yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
winter time.
I'm not really complaining, I just thought it was,
Then you're going to have to deal with the mess that's going to be inside the store for the next several months.
Well, staff's got a draft of a motion that could be made if anybody feels like making a motion, if there's not more anybody wants to ask or talk about.
Sure, I'll make the motion that the Fishbeck traffic study provided as a condition for application PUD 1997-01-F be accepted, and acknowledge that condition 3C of the Meyer PUD minor amendment report and decision order has been met.
support.
Any discussion on that motion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Next on the agenda is new business, but there's nothing shown under new business, so we don't have any new business to deal with tonight. John, I take it?
Correct.
And then next up is our second and last public comment. If the public has any more comment, the public is shaking its head, so we'll close public comment. Next up is other business. There's nothing shown there. Any news on the, that clear cutting thing by,
Nicollet Bank?
yeah, Cracker Barrel, or any
Yeah, we
news
have
on the
not-
traffic study with the 7 Brew situation?
I have not heard from Nicollet
Okay.
Bank. We've been in contact with them, we've talked to them, and they know what they're required to do. Basically, they are going to at some point have to return here with a landscaping plan, but no news yet.
Okay.
We do have 7 Brew I do actually have need to get your direction on an item. We have an application that came in for Bermley Hills. It's a new site condominium. So as you know, Bermley Estates, or I think it's technically called Bermley Hills Estates. I think we might have to check on the name, but, so that's the subdivision that's off of Bermley, kind of west of Ashland Park. So it was built as phase one. There are two areas where a second and third phase were to be built at some point, and they never were. The plat never was established. So this is in the back of that property, 35 single-family lots. It would basically be between currently where there's Bermley Estates and Traditions, which is currently homes being built there. This would be a new site condominium there. It basically fits in where there would have been a second phase of Bermley Estates. So it's a continuation, although it is different. Bermley Estates is public streets. This would be private streets, site condominium. But essentially, that has been presented to us. What I'm asking is, we will do an introduction to the Planning Commission on October 26th, but the Planning Commission is required to do a public hearing, and that would be at the meeting, and because of the 15-day notice, the public hearing to be scheduled would be for November 9th, and we wouldn't meet that 15-day requirement. So I'm asking if you'd be okay if we set the public hearing for November 9th for the consideration at that point.
We haven't even seen anything on it yet.
You know, you have not.
Is there a huge rush? Why couldn't this wait till our December meeting for a public hearing?
It could. It's totally up to you. I'm asking on just behalf of the applicant, but it's up to you.
Is he trying to get in before the weather?
Well, they'll still have to come back at a subsequent meeting for findings of fact, then it has to go to the town board as well. So the earliest.
They're going to be single-family residential.
Correct.
That's,
It's totally the decision of the planning commission, so whatever you guys want to do.
What do people feel like?
Not sure I understand. Explain it to me again.
So if it comes in, typically when an item comes before you, you accept the application and then you set the public hearing.
I'm sorry. I just don't understand the dates. So we don't have a meeting in early October.
Correct.
Our next October meeting is the
26.
26th.
6. So we're using.
And so we will have that on our agenda on the 26th?
Correct.
And then their next opportunity, because of Thanksgiving, would be the first meeting in December to have a public hearing.
Correct.
And they're not going to get this done till January next year anyways.
Right. Yeah, it still has to go to town board.
I
So
don't
it's
see any reason to push it
Okay.
and schedule a public hearing ahead of time.
I got the opposite opinion, because we don't have their meeting next week, or 2 weeks that we would have, that they would, so we're messing them up there, and we're messing up with Thanksgiving.
That's a good point, too.
Why not give them a break?
Is the development that they're wanting to move forward with, what was already, what's the change? Why the need for a change? Going from what to what?
So it's all zoned for single family there. What they're doing is establishing a site condominium, similar to like Harris Hills. So it's basically like a plat. That's all they're doing, is they're establishing.
Is that a use by right there? Is that PUD or PURD? What was that development originally? Do you have any?
It's actually a traditional subdivision, which we don't see anymore. So that was where it was established as lots with public streets.
A plotted subdivision?
Yep, a platted subdivision.
Joe, you're saying give them the benefit of the doubt.
Oh, because we got two different, we got Thanksgiving, we're missing them, they're losing that meeting, they're losing this meeting next. This meeting next month, our next meeting is totally not their fault that we're not meeting, so
Right.
I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt in that.
I mean, I guess I would be okay with that. I mean, if it's an inadequate application, we always can just say, we schedule it for you, but your application's not complete, we gotta bump you. Is that
Could we
legit?
schedule the public hearing and then cancel it if the application's not complete or to our liking?
Yes, you could do that. So if for some reason you
Covers our
don't want to have it
bases.
on the 9th, we could.
I agree with that.
I don't have any strong feeling one way or the other, it's whatever people want to do.
You need a motion to that effect?
No, I don't think so. There's nothing that is this practice that we do that? It's just, I don't know if we would, it's something that we normally would not ask of you, but.
I kind of would go with Joe. I mean, we've got 2 meetings we're not having, so it does extend things. It might take them a while anyway, but they're still going to take them till December, even if
Yeah.
we speed it up a little bit.
And
I'm fine with
just
that.
for the record, as a standard of practice, that we don't have somebody coming in here and saying, well, you scheduled it for these guys, why not us? It's because we canceled one of our meetings.
It's really our first, we never have the second one on November, but it's the canceling of the first one in October is what's causing the
Yeah.
problem, so. That's why I didn't know if you wanted the motion to approve it, be based on that reason, and then you could kind of cover our bases, something like that.
If you want to pass a motion, we could do that. It's up to you. But I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
It's more a practice
Yeah,
than anything.
I'd say we could justify it. So it's on the record tonight, so.
So for the next agenda, we're going to have a public hearing for 7 Brew, and we're going to have the introduction on a site condo for Burnley Estates.
Yep. Burnley Hills.
Burnley Hills, correct. Okay.
Is it the same developer?
It's the same developer as the same builder as the Traditions that is
Oh.
currently in building homes and Traditions.
Oh, it's not the developer from Burnley Hills? It's
No,
not
I don't think-
Tom Straight.
Oh, he sold it.
It's crazy.
Yep.
Anything else that anybody wants to ask about for the next agenda? If not, anybody had enough
Make
for
a motion, we
tonight?
adjourn.
All in favor want to go home, say aye.
Aye.
Let's go home. We're adjourned. Do you need something signed to prove that you were here?
I should be at the October 26th.
See, they would have given you a star.
Missed that.
They would have given you a star if,
There won't-
you
they're
know,
not
if
gonna-
you had